Somebody that is adopting a diet similar to what we've been talking about today, and they're prioritizing animal foods, high quality, nose to tail. How do you look at supplementation on top of that? We talked about before vitamin A, vitamin D, K2, those and beyond. How do you look at supplements complementing the diet?
So I think that there is that they need to serve a role. And I'm not a supplement huckster. I don't sell them. I've been asked many times to create a supplement line, and because I know a lot about them, but I'm just not interested in doing that. Number one, I don't want to have the conflict of interest. Like I'm just selling stuff, hey, buy, everybody needs this, buy it. I don't want to happen to sell it. But also because most supplement companies, um, I have a year-long certification course, and there is a supplement module that talks about just the entire, you know, arena of supplementation and what you need to know about how they're made and what to look for, what forms of things you want to get and why, and all that kind of stuff. It is a hall of mirrors almost out there, and there is a more crap, honestly, than there is really great quality stuff. I tend to buy healthcare practitioner quality supplements. I'm able to do so because I am a practitioner. But the degree to which you can do that is great because those are a little less compromising in terms of additives and excipients and whatever um, unnecessary components. But so say you're somebody that you don't like, there's no way you're ever going to eat organ meats or whatever. You just don't like them. You don't want them. It is possible to get them in freeze-dried form and consume them that way, and you can get benefit from them that way. You're swallowing a lot of pills to get good servings, but it's legit as a way of getting that, so that kind of supplementation could be part of the picture maybe. You have to add that to your budget. Cheaper just to buy the organ meats and prepare them yourself. And there are ways of sneaking those things in without having to taste them too much. But besides that, um, I think I I I tend to be a fan of ionic trace minerals. I like Anderson Research trace minerals a lot. Um, a lot of minerals need to be ionized in the gut in order to be properly absorbed and utilized, made bioavailable to us. And ionization happens through the action of hydrochloric acid. Most people aren't making enough. And especially if you're over 40, those levels are probably going down anyway. So when you consume minerals in ionic form, liquid ionic form like that, they very readily become absorbed and utilized and can do a tremendous amount for your energy because they function like electrolytes really, really well, effectively. Um, some people, I guess, when it comes to individual supplements, it's kind of like my favorite phrase is it depends. So much depends on what it is your challenges are, your needs are. That's where bio-individuality comes into play. Do you have an autoimmune condition? Are you nutritionally depleted in some area or other? Do you have metabolic syndrome? Do you need certain things to support that? You know, there are also a lot of things available nowadays that our ancestors wouldn't have had available, um, that are not necessarily what we think of as natural foods or whatever, or even natural supplements. But because we have so many unnatural things being imposed upon us, toxin-wise and, health challenge-wise and things like that, that our ancestors really didn't have to put up with. There's some things, um, like, molecular hydrogen or, even something like methylene blue or, there are all of these things that can provide enormous benefit under certain circumstances that are not necessarily natural things, but can make an unnaturally positive difference, you know? Um, and so, um, we're living in these times where we understand more about how certain things are metabolized and what our bodies might need. Sometimes it gets more complicated than it needs to. But I think it does make sense to incorporate supplementation to some degree or another. And the recommendations I'd be inclined to make for somebody would depend entirely upon their individual situation. I do health consultation work all the time, and I'm not giving everybody the same advice, in terms of here's what I'll do, expansive, detailed blood chemistry analysis, and it kind of what will imply where the areas of imbalance are. And I know a lot about what the best ways are to kind of remediate those imbalances and maybe support certain things that are challenging somebody. Um, and so it just those recommendations are made on that basis. But you could be popping pills all day long. They're not likely to do you a lot of good unless your foundations are taken care of. Once your foundational nutritional requirements are being met, then you see what you get from that and see what's left over and then adjust what you're doing accordingly and get whatever else you might need accordingly.
Earlier, you mentioned the emu oil. Was that for K2?
Yeah, for K2 MK4 for sure. For people that, may not have access to really high quality, fully pastured poultry fat and that kind of a thing. Or, grass-fed butter for people who can consume dairy, which I can't. There's one form of cultured ghee made by Pure Indian Foods where they did extensive third-party testing to find non-detectable levels of residual dairy proteins in the final product, which most ghee does have residual proteins, this cultured ghee, and their particular process seems to eliminate all of that. So that's the only dairy product in my life, and that stuff has good K2 content, K2, MK4. Um, but yeah, the emu oil thing. So, somebody's suffering from, I don't know, calcified joints or even inflammation. I mean, the emu oil is amazing for that because it's not just about K2. It has it has omega 3s, it has vitamin D, it has vitamin A, it has all these other things in it that complement and amplify or potentiate, I guess, the value of that K2. K2 is really dominant in that product, but it's got a lot of other things. So it's great for inflammation and a bunch of other things. People seem to do really well on it. Um, it's great for skin and all these other things. You can apply it topically and do all these other things with it. So yeah, I mean, again, there are companies out there doing great things. What I've typically discovered is that you'll have a company that has a kind of a flagship product that's really unique and really good. And then they create all these peripheral products to kind of help you fill up your cart as you're checking out that are probably, okay or mediocre or maybe entirely unnecessary. And so when I advocate for a particular supplement, I don't necessarily say go out and buy everything they make, you know. But some companies are better at minimizing additives than others. There's the healthcare practitioner brand Pure Encapsulations that tends to be, like if you buy a bottle of taurine or something, it's just going to be taurine in a cellulose capsule, and that's it. It's not going to have magnesium stearate and all this other stuff added to it. So, anyway, um, yeah, there it's a jungle out there when it comes to supplementation. But and I have different things I recommend for different purposes, and some companies I love for certain things and I hate for others. Um, but I do think that supplementation is something that, given the amplified challenges that we're facing in terms of the toxic environment, the toxic soup we all live in and breathe in, um, we probably have a higher than normal requirement for a lot of things to help us deal with that. and it's hard to get it all from food, and as I mentioned earlier, since, I mean, so many of the nutrients have been depleted from our food supply just by virtue of depleted soils and conditions. Um, and so, you know, all we can do ultimately is the best we can do, right? We just try to eliminate those compromises to the extent possible. And then at the end of the day, yeah, okay, there's still chemtrails landing on your organic garden or whatever. You just do the best you can do. And, you know, if you are, you know, doing a primogenic kind of approach to things, your body's going to be detoxifying more efficiently anyway, and maybe, just drink extra, clean, pure filtered water or, um, I mean, they're just, when I think of all the things I'd be doing, it's just sort of overwhelming to think of how do I encapsulate this in a discussion of this nature. It's a little tough, but I do have my supplement module, um, but there's a lot to know if you're really wanting to be expert at this, but there's not that much to know if you just want to eat, foundationally well. And again, you see what you get from what you're doing, then you see what's left over and you adjust accordingly.
Given what you said there about the toxic soup we're living in and getting the diet right, helping with that, I'm curious, what are the biggest things we want to protect against in the environment when it comes to toxins? And then specific supplements or modalities like the sauna we can use to detoxify.
Yes, I think saunas are actually great, and saunas, infrared saunas in particular, are important because they do something on an intracellular level to mobilize those toxins out of the cell in a way that conventional saunas don't. And I actually, believe it or not, I live off grid and I have an infrared sauna. I have to hook it up to its own dedicated generator to run it, but it works great. Um, and you can use something like niacin supplements to open up, because our largest organ of illumination in the human body is the skin, actually. And and so by opening up, the capillaries of the skin more, which are an actual niacin, and not niacinamide, right? But the stuff that actually causes flushing can do. And then you exercise, and so you get that blood flowing and get it able to reach the surface of your skin, and then spend your half hour, an hour, whatever, a couple times a week in your infrared sauna. You're gonna lose a lot of toxins that way. It is really a great way, a fairly simple way of detoxifying a lot of things. I'm not sure, that we understand what we need to about things like PFAS, the forever chemicals and things like that. We have all kinds of things that are, you know, created in high-tech laboratories that are in our environment now that our bodies may not have a precedent for knowing how to get rid of. And I'm not sure the extent to which we can do it all, but we can do, again, the best that we can do. Um, Obviously things like glyphosate, but I mean, it's like literally in the rainwater, right? And when the farmers burn their fields, oh, poof, up in the air the glyphosate goes, and whatever else is going on. And minimizing plastics, obviously, I buy almost, if I'm going to buy a condiment or whatever, I am trying to the extent possible to buy glass, you know. And there's silicone, the things you can use to store things and, refrigerate in and whatever else to take, the leftovers and do something with that way. Um, just, minimizing unnecessary, you know, problematic things. Um, um, when it comes to trying to do things with your soil to kind of help sequester a lot of that crap. Um, I mean, I know a lot about what you can do to, eliminate those things in the things that you're growing, There's actually a lot that people can do. There isn't any one supplement or whatever that's going to do it all. I do think that things like, glutathione and acetylcysteine, things that help to manufacture, that increase your glutathione levels, which is your body's most important antioxidant enzyme. That will oftentimes take the hit so that your tissues don't when it comes to inflammation. Uh, More people than ever are suffering from autoimmune. And so figuring out what kinds of foods that may be or substances that may be triggering your immune system is really important in eliminating those things and then figuring out how to put out the fire, which is the inflammation, and then working on healing the damage to specific tissues that may be affected. I know a lot about autoimmune, and it's a major, 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 major. It's probably the biggest actually epidemic of our time that people just don't even realize because most people are in silent autoimmunity. In other words, their bodies are reacting to certain things they don't really understand until they become sympathetic or symptomatic rather. And then they're trying to go at the symptoms and they don't really realize there's an underlying thing going on. And it's very, very common for people to have an autoimmune condition and not know it, or to have multiple autoimmune conditions actually and not know it. And there are a lot of reasons for that may or may not be discussable in this format, um, but regardless, um, and doing using things that are anti-inflammatory, cooking more with turmeric and things like that that have anti-inflammatory effects that are rather profound, but also because curcuminoids and those things can cross the blood-brain barrier, which not a lot of things naturally can. It can also be can help a lot with neuroinflammation, which can lead to things like anxiety and brain fog and things of that nature. So taking an anti-inflammatory approach to things is always smart, whether you know what's going on with you or you don't. Um, you can't go wrong by helping to quell, inflammation however you can. Hydrating well with really pure, clean water, not the bottled crap and plastic. But there's a website called findaspring.com, and you can find maybe where in the area that you live in, there are some natural springs that have high quality natural spring water, which were obviously well designed to consume, assuming it isn't contaminated. But um, or getting a really high quality filtration system that helps remove those impurities, and just you know filling up your glass bottles and going off with that, during the day. Um, Please stop relying on the plastic crap, sold. It's such a ripoff, and so unhealthy. Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously, it's hard for your body to detoxify without adequate hydration.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I do believe in relying on ketones and free fatty acids as a primary source of fuel. I think we're well designed to do that. We've always selectively hunted the fattest, sassiest animals. What we have between our ears has an enormous metabolic demand.